but it really is so Portland to have a polyamory story. It's so perfect. The shots of this documentary are so perfect. So many things about Portland. There's a stop sign just below it. Hate is written on the stop sign. Just stop hate. There's another one, stop eating animals. And we are of that ilk. I love it. Stop hate, stop eating animals. I fucking love it. Like, I'm a cheering that, but at the same time, like, it's so fucking Portland. So you come out of that place, then you have a little bit of respect sometimes when you figure out that all that shit that's traditional, like, some of it is actually really fucking good. And, like, all you got to do is realize that you're not innovating when you figure out how to cuddle with 3 people. You're, like, you don't, but maybe they are. Okay, so we just watched Louis Theroux's, one of his new documentaries for the BBC called Altered States, Love Without Limits. And this is, obviously for both of us, Louis Theroux is like just one of the best in documentaries. Yeah. I mean, the first time we discovered him was when you were abroad in Edinburgh. And at the University of Edinburgh, and we turned on Netflix in the UK and just realized that it was not the same
so
Netflix.
Much content you don't get in the United States.
And just all these weird stories of Louis Theroux. This is like 10 years ago. Or no, maybe it was like 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. And all these documentaries we found about the United States from this guy in the UK who's been sent over to like look at how weird the United States is, which is like the greatest perspective when you've just all the shit you see is normal. So he's got all these things, one on gambling, you know, people who go over to Africa and shoot big game, plastic surgery, just so many good ones. Anyway, and so this is in that vein. It's another thing. It's called Altered States. There are actually multiple episodes, but we chose one that's called Love Without Limits, which is about polyamory. But one of the other things is it's about our hometown, Portland. So it's just
so Portland.
Yes, exactly.
It's the most Portlandy Portland thing ever.
It's so great.
Yeah.
And it's Louis Theroux who his real genius in documentaries is that aside from just how fun it is to see a British guy come over and look at stuff that's like your hometown and just let it expose itself for how ridiculous it is. You know, it could be anywhere. He's done so many of these things, but so much of America is ridiculous, but you don't even realize how ridiculous it is, at least to the extent until you see it just shown so objectively in a way, just like let people explain themselves and they're like, oh my God, they're so nuts. Yeah. But anyway, so it's why it's especially great to watch this one about Portland and about one of the most ridiculous aspects. And being from Portland, you're like, of course you could find these people. They're all over the place.
It's so great, too, because you say it shows how ridiculous everything is in this polyamorous scene in Portland, but he never at any point, I feel like, pushes in the interview to the point that the person being interviewed feels he's hostile or judgmental. He's so good at either having a meal with them, participating in like an event himself where everyone seems to feel like he's kind of on their side, and yet he coaxes out, sometimes comedically, like these absurdist moments, and then other times he's pretty good at getting sincere, which is what I love. I mean, my favorite part about him is he's really insightful with the documentaries, but he's funny. I just think he gets the most hilarious moments out of people.
It's so funny, yeah.
So like, subtly, where it's always over their head. They don't realize it's a hilarious scene, but when I'm watching, I'm like laughing out loud.
It's so great, because like, so this is polyamory, and it's all these different things, which is basically meaning people who are in relationships who are having, you know, multiple relationships, sexual and romantic relationships at the same time with all the consent. It's like you say, oh, now we're polyamorous, and so now instead of just having a monogamous relationship or even a monogamous marriage, we can have a boyfriend on the side, and we can even have like an exclusive boyfriend on the side, and we have both, and the kids know about it, and it's all supposed to be like a big family, and they all just explain that, and everyone says how happy they are all the time to be in this, which is like the greatest part, because it's one scene after the next of these people, him being like, well, so how do you feel about this aspect of it? And they're like, oh, it's just life has never been better, really. It's like, do you ever get sad? And they're like, I wouldn't say so. You know, just like this long pause.
Who are you trying to convince, yourself or us?
Exactly, yourself or us. There's so many great parts. There's one part like that demonstrates this point that we're talking about, where he just he almost lets them explain themselves in such a way that he never really has to make anyone feel ridiculous, because they are excited in a way to explain how they've made this thing that they think is such an innovation, this polyamory.
Yeah.
I mean,
monogamy.
yeah,
is
exactly.
outdated,
Monogamy
it's
and
archaic.
the whole thing is premised on like monogamy is so like old school. Like we figured out how like that you can be so much better than that. And so there's like this one relationship, which is the poster, which is a one woman and two guys, and they all work in IT. And they're explaining. He asks them. He's like, "Oh, so this is your bed?" And they've got a bed, and they've got 3 specific blankets. Everyone has their own blanket with their own pattern on it, so they know where to go. It's like more ridiculous than even 2 people who sleep in a bed normally, who don't have to have 2 blankets for 2 people. They just have one blanket that they both agreed on. But in this bed with 3 people, they have to have 3 blankets, so each person can have their own blanket. One of which has like dinosaurs. The other has, it's like exactly what you'd expect. And he's like, "Hey, can you all come in here and like, just like show me which side's yours?" And they're all explaining it. They're kind of excited about it. And then he's like, "So like, what do you do about like cuddling?" And I don't mean like as a euphemism. I mean like just to actually cuddle. And they're like, they just are so excited about explaining to him how they figured out how to cuddle with 3 people, like effectively.
See me in the middle. If I'm Big Spoon to Roger on the left, then Jeremy
Yeah.
can be my Big Spoon, and we
Yes.
can have a spoon train.
And he's like, and they're like,
Explaining it like it's such an innovation, too.
Yes.
Like we've solved the 3-person spoon.
Yes, they solved the 3-person spoon, which is so funny because he ends the scene being like the IT workers like figured out almost an engineering solution to their polyamory thing, which is like, but it's so brilliant in the way that when you're watching this, you're like, they think they've got it solved because they figured out cuddling. Oh God, the world's fucking problem solved. These
Yeah.
people are figuring it out. And it's so great because really at the core of something like polyamory, it's both people who really think like a decent instinct, like that the old way is kind of shit and stupid, and like why not, maybe they didn't have it figured out.
Yeah.
And then so they go and they like innovate, and they're like, how about we have sex with multiple people, so like we can just have more like fun like little flings, and like we can always be excited about a new crush and then go for it, and then everyone's all a big family, lots of support from different angles and all this stuff. And then it's like, one scene with a guy being like, I really wish my 2 like love interests could just be with me in the same house at the same time. And you're like, and like he's got like a big beard at the same time. You're like, that sounds a lot like a guy who like for forever has just wanted multiple wives, like what you're describing right now. It's like the most liberal thing you could possibly see, and then all of a sudden the impulse that just comes out of someone's mouth is like, maybe I just want to be like a man with a ton of wives. Like, who would have thought? I'm so innovative. It's like, you mean like forever in society, like all the time, what guys have done, and then they're like, this evil regime tried to, institute monogamy to some extent to like help protect the most people, and all of a sudden that's like,
It's like, yeah,
they're innovating way past that point. We're way beyond that. And then there's so many.
What emperors, kings, conquerors have done, just taking multiple wives. But now in this new polyamorous context, he's reinventing it.
You
It's
saying
just
that, by the way, this one's especially funny because the one guy who says that is in the relationship with another guy's wife. And so the guy who says that, his wife is basically like, she doesn't really want sex anymore, it seems like.
Yeah.
And so she's like, I'm glad he can go and get his jollies off with this other woman. And the other woman is with a guy who, the guy is a weird guy. He seems very lonely. You suspect maybe he's gay, maybe there's something weird about his sexuality. And so maybe he's found himself into this scenario. But in a way, you say like, oh, these emperors who figured it out. It's like, yeah, they figured out. They have like a harem with a ton of women, and they have like eunuchs running around. And I'm like, oh man, that just like fucking hits me. That other guy is like totally the like emasculated guy who's like fucking like, yeah, I guess my wife just is gonna, be with another guy all the time, and he has to like go upstairs while they like, hang out all night in the living room, because like that's the scenario. He just goes upstairs, and he's really sad about it. In one scene, he asks basically his wife, like, he'd be like, if they ever invited me to, like, participate, I'd be, like, so down. And the wife's like, you've never talked about this with me before. And I don't think that'd be something. He's like, even if they just wanted me in the room, like,
Watching.
to, like, watch, like, I could, that might be, like, I would just be
I saw it
excited
coming,
that,
yeah.
Alec totally predicted it, like, 10 seconds. He's like, I think this guy would be okay just jerking off in the corner. And then that literally comes out of the guy's mouth right afterwards. And this is sad because the guy is the saddest character
And then
in this
gets,
thing.
I mean, how much more could you be emasculated than asking very politely and delicately your wife if you could watch her have sex with someone else and she shuts you down?
Yeah, he says, because I would just be really excited about her being happy, and she's like, no.
That's
Like,
not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. We're not doing that.
Which is so tragic. I mean,
Tragic for this polyamorous, you know, the thing about it
It
is...
felt like there was just one more thing on that guy, which became more clear, because I'm open intellectually to the idea that it could be valid. But then when you see it in practice, at least in every example in this episode, there's one person who feels like they're just tolerating it. There's one
like the
person
best
who
they can
feels
do.
like they're putting up with, exactly, the one with the spooning, the girl in the middle spoon, then the two guys on the end. It becomes clear, like, both the guys feel they're in a relationship with her, and both of them are putting up with it because they like her and they don't get her without tolerating polyamory. And so it felt like there was just at least one person who was the sole benefactor and one person who was having to just put up with it in each episode, which was, you know, the ultimate, you know, conclusion for me from this episode, which invalidated it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean,
like-
you know, people,
But maybe
they're
I'm just being
doing what they want.
judgmental.
Well, yeah, you are, but also these, you know, yeah, with the two guys and the one woman, they're so nice seeming in a way. They all seem like very nice people, but she is clearly like, she says she's been a depressed person for a long time. And Louis makes a point, basically, it appears she's figured out a way to get a double portion of support, which is like, so for her, she's like basically the guy, the one who would you traditionally think of as the male with the harem of whatever, but she's got two guys. And these are two guys who, it would probably be hard for either of them, just, it's very judgy, but for them to complete a relationship with you know, to keep a relationship, because they both are very, I don't know, just the impression they give is like not like they're like fully socially capable of doing like everything that it takes to be in a relationship, like a good committed one for a long time. I know that's like a lot, but it you know, that's why you should watch this. It's really fucking great. But so them together like equal like more than enough for like a very difficult relationship and someone who needs a ton of support because of just her emotionally. And Louis, you know, looks at that, he's like, you know, it's very untraditional and weird, but like it's a woman who does need a lot of support, and these two guys are like both there. Like she gets sad and she's got two people from two sides being like, oh, I'm sorry, you know, like putting her hand on like, oh, that's great, or like whatever. Or, like when she's upset, she needs like a group. That's the funny thing, because I feel like maybe that's, you know, from the female perspective, that's like what she's getting at, where the guy is probably like, oh, it'd be great to have sex with like 3 women. Like, that'd be great. Like, what an innovation that is. It's like, no, that's the way people have thought for forever. But, you know, okay, so that's your innovation, and you've convinced people, because the polyamory's new. It's not like, oh, how about we all join a, you know, some sort of offshoot of the Mormon church, and you can just be my sister wives. Which is funny because Louis does bring that up at one point in time. He calls a guy who's with a woman who then has a new crush. He's like, that guy, he came in, he could be like your, you know, you could know him forever. You know, he's like, yeah, that is kind of crazy. He's clearly disturbed by it, but he will not admit it to the slightest. He's saying it's, you know, it's great. I'm answering your questions. Like, he's almost getting a little upset, it seems like, by the questioning. And then he's like, you know, that guy, I mean, in a way, he's like your... You know, he's kind of like your brother husband, you know, the opposite of a sister wife. And he's like, oh, yeah, it's a little bit like what we are doing in polyamory. It's like such a fucking innovation that it's this big fucking, I don't know. It's hilarious. It's hilarious because Unfortunately, their little innovation has a lot of similarities with this institution that people were doing, usually from the man with a lot of females as his, sex slaves / portion wives, and that's been around in history for a long time. But people have thought that, monogamy is that old fucking thing that is way old-fashioned and ridiculous, and people just don't know. You should just be able to, do more. It's probably more an innovation, a great innovation.
Well, I could totally imagine someone listening to us kind of dismissing polyamory and thinking, well, you're just stuck in monogamy. You can't help but judge. Our open sexuality makes you uncomfortable. This country is founded on puritanical inclinations. And,
Totally.
Which there is a lot of puritanical, like, I do have that a little bit, but at the same time, it's not like I'm Mr. Monogamy is perfect. Marriage is an ideal institution with no flaws, and it totally matches our biological impulses to only have sex with the same person from somewhere in your 20s and 30s till you're dead. That makes sense. It's like, obviously, this is how I think a lot of weird thinking happens. It's like the critique of capitalism. Obviously, there's great critiques of monogamy and marriage, and so you can go down that road and realize how valid of a path of thought that is. But then you just have to make sure you take the stutter step once the person chimes in with the alternate solution and question the alternate solution. I think that's how
at the equal standard of criticism.
At the equal standard of criticism. I think we've had this discussion about communism. It's like there's a problem with the system, aka communism, and then you don't challenge the solution. Or same thing with diet, like there's a problem with the standard American diet, let's eat like cavemen.
Yeah.
That's the solution, and that's not going to be to the same standard of evidence that every other piece of nutrition has been.
And I think even what you're saying right now, I think a lot of people aren't familiar with thinking these problems through a lot, because it's the same trend that you see over and over in different genres. But it is that problem of you have a really great critique. You are totally right. That it is. Monogamy is not only old, and it is traditional, at least in our society right now, but it is also difficult and is not easy for everyone to do, and maybe not possible for everyone. Even if I was to say it's a willpower issue, totally. But if it's maybe not possible for everyone, maybe not even ideal for everyone.
Not the right fit.
But you must critique the opposite. That's like capitalism. You're right. That's like a diet, like the fucking traditional American diet or whatever we'd like to say. That doesn't mean that any alternative you should be a sucker right into. And that was the thing about this a little bit, is it does have a lot of similarities with a cult or some sort of alternate nonsense where they've got their own words. Oh, compersion. Oh, we're so sophisticated we can educate you. It's compersion. That's when you're so happy for someone else to have happiness through being fucked by someone else. It's just like this. It's just, that's so culty. It felt culty.
Very much like
what was
good
the
thing. Polyamory is good because it keeps more people out of the cults they might otherwise join. Honestly how I felt watching it.
No, it was
like,
it was like
sure.
I'm not going to be bound by these traditional puritanical Christian fucking nonsense beliefs. Fucking cult with all the, it's not even a cult. There's no leader, right? It's not organized religion. It's disorganized. It's fucking.
No, it wasn't a cult, but their psychology felt like kind of ready for that. It's like the moment when the cult leader's like, okay, now everyone's wives I will have sex with, and they're like, okay. They rationalize that part. They're not like, no, because I get nothing out of that. That's only a you thing.
What was the thing that they called a man who's basically with your wife or another, the significant other of the person that you're with?
In this?
Metamor. Oh. That was the other vocab word they had.
What was metamor?
That's like brother husband is metamor. That's the official.
That's your metamor is the other guy who also wants to sleep with.
Yeah, that's your metamor. That's your brother husband. That's your sister wife. It's a metamor if you're in the polyamory community, which is so funny because that is like part of organized or disorganized religions, cults, weird alternative new agey ways of thinking where they do start throwing the vocab words at you. People do it in all industries. I mean, finance people throw out so many stupid ass words to justify it. Especially the people, especially the people who are into like charting and all the pseudo nonsense stuff that has never been proven to actually do anything. It's like there's so many things. I don't even know. This is kind of beyond, but where it's like, oh, it's going to do a double dip past the 200-day mark moving average. It's a fucking bubble. And they got a word for it. And you're like, no one has ever shown that shit is actually legit. It's a bunch of nonsense. That's why every fucking disclosure says past performance doesn't indicate, what happens in the future, because that's actually statistically valid and everything else is not. But it's the same thing, all genres. Once you start getting the vocab words, it becomes seductive to people. They're like, oh my god, I'm in a new thing. I got the new truth.
And then people on the outside who don't understand it just need to be educated.
They don't even know what compersion is. If they only knew what compersion is, then they could just have it. And then she won't even let her husband look from the corner.
I know.
Have his full compersion. She won't even let him.
He seemed so stifled. It was so... Okay, so I have a question, which is, we only see... I mean, this isn't going with stats or data, or there's no research in this. It's just a dive into a handful of polyamorous situations. Do you think that this conclusively makes you feel like polyamory is just bullshit as suspected, or do you think it's hypothetically possible we just happen to see the portion of people who claim to be polyamorous but just have relationships that are falling apart?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is possible for a person to be very happy without ever being in a long-term monogamous relationship. It's possible. I don't think they got to join a cult called polyamory. I'm calling it a cult because they're all on the fucking same page, which is this key indicator. If someone's out there with the confidence, maybe people would say it before George Clooney was with his current wife, who maybe that is like the new truth, and he's really just like, oh no, actually monogamy is the greatest. But before George Clooney was with his wife, Amal, who's like this very successful, very attractive woman who's like, he finally has like a wife, a long-term person. Mm-hmm. But before that, he basically just dated like the most attractive people that existed for like short amounts of time, and then just like moved on. And everyone's like, well, like, probably works for George Clooney. He's probably living it. I mean, no one else can do that, but he's doing that. And I think there's probably a sense of truth, and not even at the George Clooney level. There's probably people out there, men and women alike, who, for whatever reason, could be just more satisfied knowing themselves with many relationships, sometimes perhaps overlapping, sometimes not, but, maybe basically for whatever reason, monogamy just isn't the right fit for them. But, I definitely don't think that's the full way, and I think that monogamy just being critiqued as a thing is like, actually, I think it probably is best for most people, because it's like saying like, is eating healthy the best thing for most people, or like occasionally like eating crap the best thing for most people? It's like, well, like, yeah, like everyone wants to occasionally eat crap, and like for most people, actually, occasionally eating crap like is like okay, but like occasionally eating crap in the like monogamy versus not monogamy scenario usually equals the healthy eating, like feels like I don't want to do this anymore, like you gotta only eat crap now. So like there's a real strong incentive in the world of everyone's emotions to go, you know what, I'm not gonna eat crap in the dating and romance department. I'm not gonna do it. I might want some fucking crap. I might have a moment where I'm like, oh, crap looks good, but I'm not going to do it. And it's obviously difficult. It's obviously a choice, a very consistent choice that you have to make every day. But it is, at least, I think there's a great case for it being superior to the alternative. Because the alternatives are not new. They are not new. That is like human nature, people fucking everybody. That is like obviously not the new truth. That is like so the fucking baseline common
being in a
denominator.
relationship and then feeling like you want to have sex and then being like, oh, I want to act on that because it's natural.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, actually, you made a commitment and that requires sacrifice, which is this crazy word that means you wanted or valued something and you don't partake.
Yeah, and if people change their mind or realize they've made a mistake or something really happens, I don't think that means that they've totally fucked up. I think almost sometimes these polyamory relationships seem like, Louis says it, he probably made it up, but he says, have you ever heard polyamory? This is like for more older people who are married who become polyamorous later in their relationship. Like, have you ever heard of polyamory being sometimes referred to as slow divorce? And the woman who he says that to is like, nope, never heard that before.
No.
And who knows if Louis made it up, but it does in a way seem like that. It seems like people who, you know, one of the relationships, the most possibly tragic one, the guy who basically seems very lonely and sad about it, and with the wife who's with the other guy. You know, that relationship, one day she had postpartum depression, and she was on Facebook connecting with old flings, it seems like, to kind of get, you know, something back in life. And one of the guys she was like basically wanted to go then hook up with, I'm interpreting it, you can do your own analysis of this because she kind of tells the story, but and then she goes to her husband like, oh my god, I'm having impure thoughts, goes to her husband and tells him about it, and then like a month later, instead of her just, maybe she already did cheat and then she decided to lie and say that she hadn't done it yet and then was thinking about it, or maybe she did, maybe she was just so, but in either event, it was a woman who wanted to cheat in a moment of weakness, and she either did and then lied and then said she just was thinking about it and then got his permission basically over the course of a month, or something else. But essentially, instead of at that point in time her going, I think our relationship is done and I want to be with another man, she said, actually, I want our relationship in a certain capacity, but I want sex from other men and other relationships and even romantic long-term connections with other men. And they decide basically just to not end their relationship at that point. So it's this very drawn out overlapping circle thing where instead of having any sort of clean lines of like, okay, well, maybe this isn't working anymore, we could be like friends, we could co-parent, like we just had a child, obviously, and you can then go off and do whatever you want with your life because this isn't working. They have this open interpretation of it where we can still have our relationship, but then I'm going to be having sleepovers with people in our living room. I mean, I guess, honestly, it's just, I'm not convinced, obviously, but I guess it's possible, hypothetically, that someone could find that better than just, oh, actually, we should just have two places, and, like, we can co-parent, you know, like a nice divorce scenario would be. But perhaps that's not something they're willing to accept, or perhaps divorce is not something they're willing to accept, and that's just what's going on there.
Yeah, because somehow they've navigated, divorce would create chaos and pain and acknowledgement, and in that scenario, you have two couples where there's one of each is pairing up, and if she were to divorce her husband and then go over, then that would threaten her love/fiance's wife. Mm-hmm. So that would create double chaos. It would rip apart. So whether the other relationship likes it or not, she would have to force his hand, and maybe he says yes, probably, or he says no, but it would chain reaction. So I'm suspicious that, because what I've seen is people have a hard time breaking up when they should in general. People break up and get back. I feel like it's really common that people break up and get back together. Mm-hmm. Sometimes multiple times, and people stay with people who they should have, when they realize it's time to break up, it maybe is months or maybe even up to a year that people split up. Could be years. And so knowing that inclination, because when you're in a committed relationship, you realize how much gravity there is towards staying in it. I mean, it's really a rip in your life to have to separate.
Yeah.
So I'm suspicious that very inclination is kind of at the center of this, whereas becoming polyamorous might even be more just an easier transition. than breaking up in general.
If you're in
Because
Portland, you're in Portland, because people be like, yeah, that's not crazy.
Yeah, let's say, yeah, exactly.
I think the Portland of it all is a very interesting thing. It's also very interesting for our perspective, because this is something that if you said it in Portland, especially in a lot of places, not everywhere, there are people who are just as like conservative as anywhere else perhaps in Portland, but there are a lot of people like this, a few people that way, but a lot of people who it's not necessarily polyamory, but it's something else, just a number of things that are just all encompassing what you could call left or liberal extremism in a way, not like extremism as in dangerous, but extremism as in just so far beyond what what you thought was left is like fucking regressive to them, and like you don't even get on until you're like knowing all the fucking different things. And if they told you like we're in a polyamorous thing, you're like, what? You'd be like, you're offending me right now. Like it's a weird place. Portland's a place where you get to do whatever you want, and it's really like it's a pretty great place in a way.
I think it's an awesome town.
So and that having a pretty great place where people aren't suffering so much is what allows some of this type of stuff to flourish, because there isn't as much challenge. There aren't people going around with a lot at stake going, fuck you and your stupid ass ideas about trees, like, because people are like, you know what, trees are nice, we're in Portland, we all chose to be in Portland, we like trees. I mean, and it's someone who's out there being like loving every fucking tree, like I don't want to really get on a pedestal and tell them they like don't know the first thing about anything, even if I think that, but at the end of the day, they're fucking protecting trees, and that's pretty good, even though like sometimes it's totally in excess. But I mean, that's the perspective we get. We come out of a place where it's like the most excessive, so we feel like we're constantly like shitting on people in that scenario. But if in reality, like me personally, compared to the average person's perspective on like relationships, marriage, obviously, on the scheme of things, coming from Portland, I seem like I'm just shitting on it. But compared to the world, I'm so not traditional. And the way that I think about things like marriage or relationships, or whether or not people should be able to have sex with whoever they feel like, or be sexually however they want. I mean, the way that in my normal, way of being, like, I fucking, I think that people playing with gender is like fun, totally interesting, whatever they want to fucking do. But obviously, like, I don't want to throw out everything, and I guess I'm not articulating this well.
No, I feel the same way. I feel like I'm ultimately open-minded to these things, but I feel the way about polyamory like I do about ghosts. Like, I'm totally intellectually open to the possibility that they exist. I've just never encountered someone who's convinced me that it's real.
Yeah, there's that.
Is that too harsh? No,
there's that aspect to it. I just meant from our perspective. I mean, I am not someone who's going to tell people that I'm the farthest from you need to be in marriage to
telling people
sex,
what to do.
Their sexual lives, what they should be able to do or not do. I do think that people fuck it up a lot when they get off the traditional track, but it's not that the traditional track is good in any way. Like that, marriage, don't have sex out of wedlock, don't have, don't do all the things that people say. But the problem is that for the most people, monogamy actually is a good solution, even if they're monogamous with like 20 people in their life. It's probably a better always to be monogamous. Or, and then there's also, like, it's just like, it's it's the perspective I have on everything. Drink all you want, but don't ever drink and drive. Have sex with whoever you want, but don't do it unprotected with someone who's like you don't, that you hardly know. Like, there are things that people always fuck up the line for, that, so sexually I feel like it's like, yeah, have as many sexual partners as you want, but you don't have to have them at the same time. And, cause like that's really going to fuck up your life. And if you want to have children, that's great, but like choose it. Don't just like have unprotected sex and then have it happen to you. And it's just like and I feel like I'm not really that traditional, but the things that people are like, oh, that's so traditional, like don't have sex with multiple people at the same time, or like don't like have the willpower to be monogamous, and if you don't want to be, then fucking end it. But if you do want to have a good life and a good stable relationship, monogamy is like probably something that you should figure out how you can do in your life, because you're probably not going to have a lot of stability in a good relationship if you can't fucking master that. I'm sorry, but that's my opinion, and I think it's probably time tested. I think that's the problem that people have with tradition, is they don't realize that tradition actually means time tested. And because people have had a bunch of fucking ideas over the course of human history, and traditional is not really like, oh, it's the old fucking thing. It's the thing that worked. All the other fucking ideas didn't work. You know, that's what it is. So I hate to be someone, like doing traditional, but like, yeah, like it's the same thing. You know, having kids out of wedlock, having kids really early when you can't fucking do it. There's a reason they tell you not to, and it's not just because they fucking want to control you sexually. Have sex with whoever you want, whenever you want, but probably be protected so you don't get fucking diseases that are gonna fucking change your life forever, or have kids when you have no intention of doing so. But, so I obviously have very strong beliefs about this stuff. And at the same time, I have I'm not married. But I've been with the same person for 11 years. Very intentional. Very caring about the relationship. Very important. But I am completely untraditional. When I say that to people, they're like, what the fuck? Like, you're so fucking... Something must be fucking wrong with you. You know, it's weird for a person like me to be a huge defender of all these traditional things. But yeah, I think traditional means time tested. It's not fucking... people miss that all the time. They miss that. I hate traditional stuff. And yet, like, you gotta give it the same level of scrutiny as all the other alternatives, just like you were saying. And when you give it the same level of scrutiny, you realize a lot of the alternatives are not new. They've been tried 1,000 times and failed every time, or most of the time. And the traditional thing worked like has like a good batting average, even if a good batting average is 400. You know? That's the funny thing about batting averages, right? You know, you're like, oh, you got a 400? That's like an insane batting average. You hit it like 4 out of 10 times? It's like, well, I guess depending on what it is, that could be the best fucking option. You think of some other stupid idea and it's got a 1 out of 10 average, and that sucks. That's a real suck. Not everything has to be perfect for it to be the best. And so... people miss that all the time. It's a big rant that is prompted by that. But also it's prompted by the position that we come from, the society, the part in the United States, in Portland, Oregon, one of the most unique places in the United States, watching a thing on the excesses of Portland, Oregon that really does feel like, I mean, it could be in other places, but it really is so Portland to have a polyamory story. It's so perfect. Mm-hmm. The shots of this documentary are so perfect. So many things about Portland. There's a stop sign, and just below it, hate is written on the stop sign. Just stop hate. There's another one, stop eating animals. And we are of that ilk. I love it. Stop hate, stop eating animals. I fucking love it. Like, I'm cheering that. But at the same time, like, it's so fucking Portland. So you come out of that place, then you have a little bit of respect sometimes when you figure out that all that shit that's traditional, like, some of it is actually really fucking good. And, like, all you got to do is realize that you're not innovating when you figure out how to cuddle with 3 people. You're, like, you don't... But maybe they are.
You're getting too on your high horse. Taper
I
it back.
I don't know. I mean, I really...
See
you
how
can't,
triggered he is by the polyamory?
Totally
He's
triggered.
just it's
I'm
unraveling
so
your...
I'm so triggered.
Your monogamy indoctrination is just unraveling.
I know.
It's
I had to be...
pulling at your
I was
psychological
indoctrinated.
threads.
Of course, I must have been indoctrinated. I couldn't have just looked around the world and gone, actually, like, after a long period of time, this is actually, like, the way best. But all you gotta do is watch people for enough time. Watch people fuck up. Watch people fuck up their diets. Watch people fuck up their beliefs about politics or economics or finances or whatever the fuck else. And you go, you know what? Like, I know there's a ton of theories out there. But, like, look at what's worked for a decent amount of people for a long period of time and isn't, like, super clever. You know, because some people are always a little bit intrigued by the super clever things, and super clever things usually are a little bit more shiny. It's hard to see the underbelly, but anyway, the clever solutions are the most intriguing, but also not always working.
What do you mean by clever? What example are you thinking of?
Well, I mean, we've had this discussion before, but clever on how I'm so good with finances because I can hack credit cards.
Oh yeah,
You know,
I
I
see
mean,
what
that's a you know, I have listened. I am intrigued.
I'm
love
not
the
good
idea.
at making more than I spend.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the foundation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly the point. I love the
It's
idea
not-
that people have figured out how to get free vacations and all this fucking awesome stuff. I'm jealous. I try a little bit. I mean, I have credit cards. I try to get some points. I've bought stuff with credit card points, but I also think like. Yeah, the thing that like
People
works
are
the
so
most is like
focused
spending
on, like,
less than you. Yeah, spending
Diet
less
and
than you make.
exercise, but what the trick is eating metabolically to your blood type. That's what people.
Yeah, or the trick is just giving yourself a little bit of cheat day because they're always too harsh on you, or whatever the fuck the explanation is. The trick is eat breakfast. Everyone fucks up the whole breakfast part. That gets you going.
That gets the metabolism.
Back in the day when they were hunting, you know, and eating meat only, it's like, what fucking myths are you watching? And did they even have to worry about heart disease? How long did they fucking live? Did you go research how long they lived? You know, it's like, nowadays I want to hit 3 digits, okay? I'm not worried about what cavemen lifespan, like, they were so great. They ran after these fucking buffalo. Occasionally, like, 3 people out of 50 hunting buffalo got, like, fucked up and dead in a hunt. But, like, the rest of them got a ton of food. It's like, cavemen are not your idol. I love it. I love thinking about evolutionary psychology. I love thinking about, the frame of reference is great, but too clever. Too clever.
I've never thought of that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Clever is appealing. You gotta see when you're attracted to the shiny objects. I'm definitely attracted to the shiny objects, so that's why I'm a little bit. And I'm attracted to clever things, and I like to think that I'm clever. It's a very British word to use, but anyway, you know.
Louis Theroux's a British.
I know, yeah. BBC documentary using the word clever. Clever is a great word. I love it. But
God, I love it. I think he's like so perfect. One of my favorite kinds of documentarians.
Yeah.
I want to watch this whole thing. It's the first I've seen of the series, but
yeah, and they stand alone too. Like, you could watch this. I mean, when I remember some of the other ones, he's done so many and they feel like TV shows, but they're really all these standalone documentary looks, and especially for an American, I mean, for anyone really in the whole world, but for an American, if you haven't, I don't want to say that like the British perspective on America is like the greatest thing, because like the British have had a lot of perspectives on a lot of cultures that are not their own, and you know, with varied responses over the course of history. But it is it's
refreshing in a dose.
Interesting. Yeah.
I love it for the sake of this. I mean, it's a little heavy-handed to say. I mean, I spent
and it's especially refreshing when you just get to. He's just so damn good at what he does. It's just, I can't stress it enough. If you have not seen a Louis Theroux documentary, aside from maybe the Scientology one, which is not the best of the Scientology documentaries, so you wouldn't get the right perspective if you saw his versus, you know, maybe like Going Clear or something like that. But for him just doing the weird stories about people in the United States, it's so great, so compelling. You got anything else to say about this one?
No.
It's so fun. We might have to do
I want to watch some more.
Or we'll just watch them. Maybe we won't film it all. Whatever reactions. But Louis Theroux is the highest recommendation. Is probably not going to be nominated for an Oscar, an Emmy, or whatever. But the BBC documentaries are, if you are a fan of documentaries, as good as it gets. And that's what Blue Planet and Planet Earth are also. Louis Theroux is a correspondent. It's very difficult to get his content inside the United States, because the BBC, for whatever reason, or whoever is in the United States, someone at some place should get smart and buy this stuff because it's so great. But they haven't so far. The fan base is not huge in the United States, and if we didn't have that chance encounter of logging on to Netflix when we were in the UK for a 7-day period, 6 years ago, we may not even know who the fuck he is. He's actually related to Justin Theroux. I read on, who's the guy who's an actor and
married to Jennifer Aniston,
Is he
right?
married to
I
her?
think
Yeah.
so, or with
I mean,
her,
so
somewhere.
I think they're cousins. But you would never know. But yeah, I kind of remember finding out about him in the first place and going, who the fuck is this guy and why have I never heard of him? I love documentary. He's the best at screwball interview by far. There's no one. He's in a category of his own. Anyway, high praise going on for probably 3 or 4 minutes now. But
Worthy. Yeah.
okay.